tend to believe that the geography of our lives is permanent. The towns we build, the amusement parks we visit, and the highways we drive across are etched onto our maps, carved into the concrete and anchored by massive investments. We assume they will remain for generations to come. But across the vast expanse of the United States, there are coordinates where entire structures, communities, and landmarks didn't just fall into decay. They were completely erased from the physical world. One year, they were bustling hubs of human activity, defining the culture of a region. And the next, they were deliberately wiped off the map, leaving behind nothing but empty fields, dense forests, and an unsettling silence. These are the extraordinary places America lost forever, and the haunting reasons why they were systematically removed from existence. Our journey begins beneath the surface of America's modern infrastructure. Throughout the mid-20th century, the United States entered an era of aggressive engineering, constructing massive dams to power the growing nation. But the cost of this progress was paid in history. Consider the fate of Kennett, California. In the early 1900s, Kennett was a booming copper mining town, home to thousands of residents, schools, hotels, and a bustling railroad line. It was the heart of Shasta County, producing millions of tons of ore that fueled the industrial growth of the West Coast. But in the late 1930s, construction began on the massive Shasta Dam project. The federal government issued eminent domain, declaring that the valley hosting Kennett would serve as the reservoir basin. Families who had lived there for generations were forced to pack up their lives, abandon their family homes, and watch their community get dismantled piece by piece. Once the population was evacuated, specialised demolition crews moved in to salvage what they could, leaving the heavy stone foundations and skeletal concrete remains behind. In 1944, the floodgates of the newly constructed dam closed. The rising waters of the Sacramento River slowly rose, swallowing Kennett whole. Today, the entire town sits perfectly preserved, dark and silent, under more than 400 feet of water at the bottom of Shasta Lake. It is a ghost town accessible only to the deep water sonar of researchers, completely lost to the living world, a silent monument buried beneath millions of gallons of water. Further east, an entire chapter of American roadside culture was systematically dismantled by the arrival of the interstate highway system. In the 1940s and 50s, Glenrio, sitting directly on the border of Texas and New Mexico along the legendary Route 66, was known as the $1 Million Oasis. Because of its unique geographic position, it developed a fascinating economy. The Texas side had bars because New Mexico was dry, while the New Mexico side had gas stations because Texas had higher fuel taxes. It featured iconic Art Deco diners, neon-drenched motels, and the famous First Motel in Texas sign. It was a mandatory stop for millions of travellers chasing the American dream westward. But in September of 1973, Interstate 40 opened, bypassing Glenrio by just a few hundred yards. The traffic stopped instantly. The neon signs flickered off and the local businesses went bankrupt within months. To prevent crime, vandalism and structural hazards along the new interstate corridor, the state departments cleared massive sections of the abandoned town, tearing down structures and leaving only a few decaying hollow shells to rot in the harsh desert sun. A place that once hummed with the engines of a changing nation was erased from the daily commute, transformed into a ghost of concrete and dust. Sometimes, the places that vanish are those built specifically for joy and escapism. In the late 1970s and 1980s, the concept of the mega theme park exploded across the United States. One of the most unique and massive experiments was Heritage USA, a sprawling Christian-themed amusement park, resort, and residential complex built in Fort Mill, South Carolina by televangelists Jim and Tammy Faye Backer. By 1986, it was the third most popular theme park in the entire world, drawing nearly 6 million visitors annually, ranking right behind Disney World and Disneyland. It featured a massive water park, historic hotels, an indoor shopping mall designed like a Victorian village, and state-of-the-art television production studios. But the massive kingdom was built on a foundation of financial sand. Following a high-profile corporate fraud investigation, criminal convictions, and a public personal scandal involving its founders, the cash flow dried up instantly. To make matters worse, Hurricane Hugo slammed into the region in 1989, causing severe structural damage to the already bankrupt park. Heritage USA closed its gates forever. Over the following 2 decades, instead of letting it slowly decay into a standard abandoned park, real estate developers moved in with heavy earth movers. The grand fantasy castles, the giant water slides, and the luxury hotels were systematically demolished, flattened into fine gravel, and paved over to make room for suburban housing developments. A multi-million-dollar empire of entertainment was completely wiped from the landscape, leaving modern homeowners sleeping on top of the erased memories of old roller coasters. There are places that were erased not because of economics or rising waters, but because they held hazardous secrets the nation could no longer afford to keep above ground. Deep in the heart of the American Midwest lies the ghost of the Weldon Spring Ordnance Works. During World War II and the height of the Cold War, this massive facility in Missouri was a critical high-security hub for manufacturing thousands of tons of explosives and later processing crude uranium for the nation's growing nuclear arsenal. It was a massive industrial city in its own right, employing thousands of workers and hidden behind miles of barbed wire fencing and military patrols. But decades of heavy chemical synthesis and radioactive processing left the soil, groundwater, and massive factory buildings dangerously contaminated with toxic materials. In the late 1980s, the United States government launched one of the most extreme environmental cleanup operations in human history. They didn't just abandon the site or fence it off, they tore down every single factory, crushed millions of tons of contaminated concrete, dismantled the massive steel reactors, and buried the entire industrial complex under a massive 45-acre stone disposal cell. Today, the factories are entirely gone, replaced by a giant, surreal gravel mound that looks like an ancient post-industrial pyramid. The place was literally erased from existence, sealed beneath millions of tons of rock to protect the future from the toxic remnants of the past. To find another completely erased community, we must travel deep into the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, to a place called Elkmont, Tennessee. Nestled in what is now the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Elkmont began in the early 1900s as a bustling, rowdy logging town owned by the Little River Lumber Company. As the timber was cleared, wealthy elites from Knoxville discovered the area's stunning natural beauty and transformed it into an exclusive luxury mountain resort colony. They built beautiful, sprawling wooden cabins, an elegant country club, and a private railroad line to bring high society deep into the wilderness. It was the premier summer getaway for the region's elite. However, when the federal government established the Great Smoky Mountains National Park in the 1930s, they began buying up the land. The residents of Elkmont were granted lifetime leases, but as those leases expired over the decades, the properties reverted to government ownership. The vibrant community slowly transformed into a silent, rotting ghost town. To restore the park to its completely natural state and eliminate structural hazards, the National Park Service brought in heavy demolition equipment. Dozens of historic cabins, outbuildings and community structures were systematically torn down, burned and hauled away. While a handful of structures were saved for historical preservation, the vast majority of this exclusive mountain colony was entirely erased, allowing the forest to reclaim the land as if humans had never stepped foot there. Perhaps the most terrifying erasure of a place in American history occurred not by design, but by an uncontrollable disaster beneath the earth. In the early 1960s, Centralia, Pennsylvania was a proud, tight-knit coal mining town home to over 1,000 residents. It had schools, churches, stores, and a thriving local economy built on the rich anthracite coal veins running beneath the borough. But in May of 1962, a seemingly routine trash fire at the town landfill accidentally ignited an exposed opening of an old coal mine strip. The fire didn't stay on the surface. It spread deep into the labyrinth of abandoned mining tunnels directly beneath the town. For decades, the fire raged underground, out of sight. By the 1980s, the disaster broke through to the surface. Toxic carbon monoxide gas began leaking into basements. The ground became hot to the touch, and massive sinkholes opened up instantly, swallowing yards and buckling highways. Realizing the town was completely uninhabitable and impossible to save, the US Congress appropriated over $42 million to relocate the entire population. The government systematically demolished over 500 homes, businesses, and churches. The postal zip code was deleted from the US Postal Service system, and the town was legally wiped off the map. Today, Centralia is a barren wasteland of empty streets leading to nowhere, with smoke still rising from the cracked earth, a town erased by a fire that is expected to burn for another 200 years. Our final stop brings us to the harsh deserts of Southern California, to a place that was once marketed as the miracle in the desert, the Salton Sea Resorts. Created entirely by accident in 1905, when an engineering failure caused the Colorado River to flood into the Salton Sink, this massive inland lake initially became a thriving ecosystem. In the 1950s and 60s, developers transformed it into a luxury resort destination. Yacht clubs were built, luxury hotels opened, and celebrities like Frank Sinatra and the Beach Boys rushed to buy property along the desert shores. It attracted more tourists annually than Yosemite National Park. It was a sun-drenched paradise of boating, water skiing, and high society. But because the lake had no natural outlet, it began to trap agricultural runoff from the surrounding valleys. The water became increasingly salty and toxic. By the late 1970s, massive wildlife die-offs began. Millions of dead fish washed ashore, and the toxic dust from the shrinking shoreline created an environmental nightmare. The tourists fled, and the multi-million-dollar resort infrastructure was abandoned. To mitigate the severe ecological and public health crisis, the state cleared out massive sections of the abandoned resorts, demolishing yacht clubs and hotels to prevent toxic dust fires and structural collapses. The bustling Riviera was entirely erased from the tourism maps, leaving behind a silent, post-apocalyptic landscape of salt and bone. The disappearance of these places is a stark reminder of the fragile nature of our built environment. The towns we build, the attractions we cherish, and the industries we create are only as permanent as the forces that allow them to exist. When an economic shift occurs, when a dam is constructed, or when an environmental disaster strikes, entire coordinates of human experience are wiped from our maps. They remind us that history is not just written in books, it is buried beneath our reservoirs, hidden under our suburbs, and sealed beneath mounds of stone. As we look at the bustling cities and landmarks of America today, we must wonder which of them will be the next to vanish into the archives, leaving future generations to wonder about the extraordinary places that were once here, before they were lost forever.